College coaches are talking Illini football, and they've got some good things to say.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Locked On Illini. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. My name is Verma, your host here at Locked On Illini, where I continue to provide you coverage daily. That's right, no such thing as an offseason here at the Locked On Network. I ask for nothing in return unless you could just hit that like button for me and make sure you smash that subscribe button, as it's still my goal to hit 5,000 subs on YouTube before kickoff. It's Thursday, and while the preview magazines aren't officially out yet, we're starting to get the hints of what the content is going to look like. And Athlon Sports recently published one of my favorite bits that they've had during the offseason, and that's the anonymous coaches. And I wanted to basically go over some of the quotes that these coaches had discussing Illinois football, because I thought you guys would find it interesting, and it shows just how far along that Bret Bielema has brought this program. This is not something I wanted to do alone. I'd like to have some outside perspective on it. So for that reason alone, I'm going to be bringing on good old JR, Thursday episode. JR, I think we're doing this on a regular basis now, so I appreciate having you on.
Hey, fine by me. I'll be here every single Thursday if you need it.
Sounds good. All right, so JR, it's you actually who brought this to my attention. From your account, the Big Ten Huddle, you basically posted almost pretty much every school and what the anonymous coaches had to say about each particular school. And again, I wanted to start off with Illinois. I figured this segment we'll discuss Illinois, whether we agree, disagree with what some of these coaches have to say. And then later on in the show, we can kind of discuss what maybe these coaches are saying about the competition. You good with that?
Let's do it.
All right. First and foremost, this coach said, I think if they would have made the playoff instead of SMU, they could have made some noise. JR, first thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the quotes that people latched onto the most when I posted it. You know, a lot of people posting the screenshots of Illinois, Penn State, and, 21-7, and they got crushed. It just shows how many people don't actually watch college football. Like, it's why, like, selfless promotion here. Like, it's why you need to watch a Big Ten channel to really understand what's going on, because there's so many different narratives out there, and there's so much different spin and stuff. I can't tell you how many people I had argue about my coordinator rankings who said, oh, well, you have no idea what you're talking about. And it's like, yes, I do. I literally hear some information about this coordinator, like, and no response, because at the end of the day, people don't pay attention enough. And it's exactly the case here. People did not watch that game. That was a game that Illinois was in the entire time on the road. It just so happened at the very end, Penn State scores a turnover, and then Penn State starts to pull away there in the end. Some people are looking at Illinois kind of like Indiana last year, where it's like, they weren't even competitive in their big games. Now, Oregon, sure. Yeah, that was a rough one for Illinois, but it was not that case against this Penn State team. And I think this quote is exactly on point. I think if Illinois had made the playoffs instead of an SMU, you would have seen Illinois, whether it was against Penn State, whether it was against Notre Dame, I think you would have seen them be at the very least competitive against the team and not just completely crap all over themselves. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that or not, in front of the entire nation, because that's what certain teams, what basically every team did in the first round, except for Clemson, kind of.
Yeah, and I think your last point is where you nailed it. Illinois last year I thought was a very good football team, but clearly not quite at the level of the ones that competed for a national championship. To piggyback on what you said about that Penn State game, again, a lot of people don't remember that the fact that was a one-score game with, I think, 3 or 4 minutes left in the game. It's not sure Penn State was dominating for most of the game, but again, we're just talking about all it takes is 1 or 2 turnovers. That can change momentum, that can shift everything around. So when I read this quote, talking about making some noise, and by making some noise, do I think Illinois possibly could have won their first game of the playoff? Sure, they would have had an opportunity. Heck, they were 7-point underdogs against South Carolina. South Carolina was one of those teams that many argued should have been in the college football playoff, and Illinois pulled off that upset. And so I do think they could have at least been in the position much better than SMU to be able to pull off an upset. But when it comes to noise, I think that probably would have been the extent of last year's team. I think there's a clear level of talent difference between the top 4 teams in the country and where Illinois was at. So it's like I agree with some of it, especially when you put SMU in there. But for the most part, it would have been nice to see, and hopefully Illinois is going to get a chance at some point this year.
Totally agree.
Next quote, they're a hard physical team that's more talented than people realize, and the program has never looked more competent. They have a clear identity from a guy who's been smart enough to hold true to his core ideas, but learn from his mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, this is Bret Bielema in a bag, right? Like, Bret Bielema had some mistakes at Arkansas, and that obviously was not the place for him. He comes back to the Big Ten, and the guy knows Big Ten ball. It's the reason why he is so successful in the Big Ten, and it's why he is coming to a second program now. And Illinois is not necessarily getting him to Big Ten championship games. However, they're also not in the Big Ten West anymore. I contend that if they were still in the Big Ten West, you may have seen that happen. However, this is the world we live in. I mean, this is basically Bret Bielema in a bag, and I couldn't agree with this statement more.
Yeah, for me, it's, there's a difference between Illinois and Indiana. Indiana gets a lot of pub and fanfare because not just Curt Cignetti, but the way Curt Cignetti coaches football, right? Like, he likes those 3-4 touchdown differences in those games that Indiana was better than the opposing team against. And that widespread brought a lot of attention to Hoosier football. Bret Bielema hasn't changed. Bret Bielema is still the same coach that he was, a decade ago. And so with that, you have a lot of running the ball, controlling the clock. And sure, I think you talked about on your show very recently, Illinois had a very good 1-score record this past season because they didn't make mistakes. But with that, you don't get a lot of the hype that someone like the Hoosiers do get. But because of that, I do feel like Illinois is still under the radar, even though they are starting to be mentioned. Here's a team you need to look out for preseason, maybe top 20, maybe even top 15 next season. But I still don't think they're quite getting the love that I think that they deserve. We'll talk about, one of the reasons that I think they should be a little bit more hyped later with a different quote. But that last statement is the one that I'm sticking to. A guy who's been smart enough to hold true to his core ideas, but learn from his mistakes. And as you said, that describes Bert perfectly. He's a kid who's been coaching for, or not a kid, he's a guy who's been coaching for 25 plus years now at different levels. And he's taken information from where he's failed. He's learned from the NFL, and he's brought it all to Illinois, where it looks like, obviously with his new contract extension, it's going to be the place he retires at. And I just think this is a perfect situation for Illinois and for Bret Bielema.
Totally agree. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a marriage like made in heaven to me. Like, this is exactly what Illinois needs. This is exactly what Bret Bielema needs. He's going to be accomplished here. And to your point, Vegas is not really giving Illinois the credit they deserve. And a lot of it is because of the, numbers and how teams have point differential wins and stuff like that. So, I mean, I went on a long thing about that with Jeff we recorded an episode this morning, and we're going to play it Thursday night at 9:00, where we talk a lot about how the media versus the Vegas odds and stuff, and how the media is actually giving Illinois a lot more credit than the Vegas odds are. And it's just kind of a weird dichotomy, and we try to dissect why that is.
All right, and we'll get to a couple more quotes right after this. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. As I'm recording this, the Minnesota Timberwolves are about to tip off against Oklahoma City Thunder. And today I decided to lay a couple points on Terrence Shannon Jr., 6+ points. I believe I got it at plus 160. I believe in our guy. I've got his shirt on right now, so I hope Terrence is able to win me money. And again, all I had to do was bet $5. And if that $5 bet wins, I'm going to get $200 in bonus bets. And the same thing can happen for you if you are a first-time bettor. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Again, head over to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Jared, we got two more quotes. The next quote says, they're returning a ton too, so that gives them a real advantage going into fall. Luke Altmyer doesn't get enough love. That kid has become a great quarterback. I'll go first on this one because I was kind of alluding to this in the last quote. Again, they're returning a lot of guys from a very good football team last year. I said in the previous segment that I thought last year's team was very good, but clearly not at a level where they could win a national championship. This one, probably not at that level either, but closer. Again, you give another year of experience to these guys who've already, for the most part, last year we were one of the youngest teams in the Power Four. This year we're going to be one of the oldest. And when you have a guy like Luke Altmyer, I've said this on the show constantly, having a senior year quarterback is almost a cheat code in today's game. And so I think that quote for me tells you why I'm so excited about this upcoming football season.
Yeah, I mean, I made a post about Luke Altmyer and just how much love he's, just not getting. I think the team is getting a good amount of love from the media. Some people have him top 10, some people top 15. So, I mean, I think there's some that could be better. I've still seen a couple top 25s that have him at like 23 or 22, and I just don't think that's accurate. However, I think Luke Altmyer is the one here that really is just not getting the credit that he deserves. He's a gamer. He's a guy that's going to go out there and put his body on the line each and every time. It's no secret that Illinois has been incredible in one-score games ever since Luke Altmyer has become the quarterback. I think in the past 3 seasons, I went back and looked. Don't quote me on this. I need to double-check it. But I think Illinois is like 10-1 in one-score games in the past 3 seasons, which is just absolutely incredible. I think it's 10-4. Sorry, 10-4. But still, that's a phenomenal record to be in that many close games and to come out on top. It's fantastic for them to be able to do that. And a lot of that comes down to your quarterback. Yes, it comes down to your defense too, but a lot of that comes down to having a gamer at quarterback, somebody that's never going to get you out of the game and somebody that is going to do everything he possibly can to get you to win the game at the end of the day.
And finally, I think it would be massive for this league if this program could make the playoffs. This is proof of concept for a long-term vision of recruiting and developing at a place that isn't Ohio State, Penn State, or Michigan, and it's paying off. I'll give you the floor first on this one.
Yeah, me and Jeff were just talking about this a little bit on a recent episode where the big problem with the Big Ten right now is that their second-tier teams are not acting like second-tier teams. Those are the Michigan States, the Wisconsins of the world. Iowa's holding up pretty well, teams like that, but you are really having to have teams like Illinois and Indiana come in and be those second-tier teams in the Big Ten, and it's nice when that happens, but that's supposed to be frosting on the cupcake. Like, that's not supposed to be what you rely on. Now, thankfully, you have Bret Bielema and Kirk Cinetti, 2 very good head coaches, and Bret Bielema, somebody who's been proven in the Power 2 or the Power 4 conferences and in the Big Ten. However, you don't know if Indiana is going to stay up at that top. I think Illinois is. I feel pretty confident in that. I feel pretty confident in Indiana too. However, it's also only one season. So can they continue to be that second-tier team? We'll see. Illinois, I feel good about it. And thank goodness I do feel good about it because, like I said, the Wisconsins and the Michigan States of the world, they're kind of letting us down.
Yeah, and I think you kind of nailed it there. With the fact that Wisconsin's struggling a little bit, Michigan State is struggling a little bit, Iowa, it's still being Iowa, but Illinois and Indiana have an opportunity here to cement themselves in that second or third tier in the Big Ten Conference when they've been used to being, on the bottom. And there's no better time than to establish yourself at this level with it. Those media deals are not too far away, and they're going to be happening very, very soon. And you want Illinois football, and I know we're a basketball school, but we want football to be showing themselves as impressive and one of those teams that other conferences are going, or at least the Big Ten Conference is going to want to maintain, just in case this talk of a super league or whatnot does happen. And the fact that, you have the perennials, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, who are always good, that's fine. We'll put them on their own tier. But if Illinois can establish themselves like in that tier right below, I think there's a lot of talent in the country that's going to be interested in coming here, because not only are we going to be putting you in the NFL, Bret Bielema has a proven track record of that. But coming to Illinois is not just a path to go to the NFL. It's also now going to be a path to compete for, potential Big Ten championship. Sure, you're not going to win it more often than not, but at least you're going to be competing. And right now, competing is kind of the name of the game.
Totally. And I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is how much money the Big Ten does get from teams making the playoffs. I mean, we're looking at a situation right now where there could be a basically completely at-large structure. And if that happens, the Big Ten could find themselves with 5, maybe even 6 teams in the college football playoffs. If that happens, Illinois gets a big cut. All these other teams get a big cut of that. You heard the stories about Notre Dame last year and how they got to keep all of that. Now, if Illinois makes it to the college football playoffs, they don't get to keep all of that, but that's one more team that is going to give that to the entire conference, which one makes the conference better, and then also for Illinois gives them just that much more money. So yes, Illinois is a basketball school. Nobody is refuting that. However, you need to also invest in football so that way you can have more funds for your basketball program. It's what a lot of Maryland fans are upset about right now. They want to see Maryland go all in on the basketball program and say, heck with football. You can't do that. You have to have a football program and you have to put money into that because football is the revenue driver for a lot of these schools. So you don't necessarily have to be a Georgia. You don't necessarily have to be, an Ohio State. But you do need to have a competent football program that can get those 10-win seasons at least every 2, 3, 4 years or something like that.
All right. Speaking of the Big Ten, again, Jerry, you posted almost every single team on the Big Ten Huddle Twitter account. By the way, follow that if you haven't already. There's no better source out there for just big picture, Big Ten talk. Jared, what would you say are the most talked about quotes that don't involve Illinois?
Yeah, I got 3. So I've posted just about all of them. I think I have 1 or 2 left. I ended up not posting them all together in days anymore because certain ones started getting skipped. But the ones that seem to be the most popular or the most talked about, one of them was from Michigan. An anonymous coach said Michigan is an elite level recruiting program. So yeah, they lost Mason Graham, but they're ready to plug in that next guy. It's not plug and play, but it's close. So some confidence there in Michigan that they're not just going to have first rounders and move on and have to try and rebuild again. They've got more first rounders. They've got more high round draft picks ready to go.
Which makes sense. Like even under Jim Harbaugh, they weren't really a top 5 recruiting team. They were always just one of those that recruited really, really well, top 4-star guys. And they just continued to develop them, and when you develop top and 4-star guys, well, they start playing like 5-star guys. And that's why you kind of see the success that they had.
Yeah, for sure. The second most popular was Ohio State. One of the quotes said, "The resilience of Ryan Day and his staff is really, really remarkable. I don't think they get enough credit from the public for how they managed the playoff run after losing to Michigan. The call for his job was absolutely ludicrous. Do you need to beat Michigan? Yeah, sure, but the program is at the very top of the sport because of the head coach."
I like the quote, except for I would replace the word public and just replace it with Ohio State fans. I think the rest of us, we're impressed. Like we've never, had the dog on Ryan Day. We all understand, his track record is just absolutely amazing. It's the Ohio State Buckeye fans who I think need to be reminded just how lucky they are to have a guy like Ryan Day in charge.
Yeah, no, they do for sure. And I'm somebody that's one of them. So I will take that critique. Noted. Thank you, Sonny. All right, and then the last one, everybody's favorite, Indiana. They are always a lightning rod. Actually, Illinois probably had the most popular one. It was probably that second one that you mentioned before, but this one probably comes at least close, if not second. So says maybe the biggest culture change at a program in the history of the sport.
Wow,
that's crazy.
Wow. I'd probably have to think about it a little bit more, but I also think that's why they got the amount of publicity that they did. I'm really curious to see what happens this year. Indiana is one of those programs where Curt Cignetti talked a very big game, but he's going to have to back it up a second season. And this year, they're not going to be Cinderellas. Everyone's going to know that the Indiana Hoosiers are a very competent football team. And so I think in order to have a turnaround, you've got to maintain it over a couple of years and not just be a one-hit wonder. But, Kurt Cignetti, if he's as good as he tells you he is, they absolutely could be, that statement could be true.
I was just on the guest I had on the podcast the other day about, what, like, if we put ourselves in the shoes of this a year ago, when we were looking at lowly old Indiana and saying, they're going to be a crappy team, low in the power rankings everywhere. I think their win total was like 3.5, 4.5 last year, something like that. It was putrid. It was so bad. And then for them to come out, like, I have to remind people every now and then, like, remember how bad Indiana thought it was. Like, Indiana, it's like if Purdue comes out this season and makes the college football playoffs. Yes, Purdue, like, it's not going to happen. Purdue has way too hard of a schedule. But, like, yes, Purdue is looked at as a bad team, and they had a bad year last year. They fired their coach, all that stuff. But if they somehow came out and just everybody on their schedule was trash, and they go 11-1 and lose to the only good team on their schedule, and they still make the college football playoff, yeah, you got critiques for them, but still, that's a team with a 3.5 win total. For them to make the playoffs, like, that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely right. Okay, right after this, we're going to switch over to basketball, and we'll talk about some of the Big Ten teams that are going to be having their players returning next year. And welcome back. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Look, sometimes now with the way all these algorithms work, this video, if you watched it before, this channel might show up on your feed regardless, even if you're not subscribed. So do me a favor, just glance over there and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Again, it's my goal to hit 5,000 before we hit the kickoff against Western Illinois. I believe it's on August 29th of this year. Next up, we're going to switch over to the basketball side. Look, full disclosure, as of this recording, it's Wednesday evening when we're recording this. And right now, players still have until I believe midnight tonight to decide whether they want to return to college basketball. We haven't heard anything on Will Riley. Not that I'm expecting to hear anything on Will Riley, but I'm just going to table that talk for tomorrow's episode. What I decided to talk to JR about was some of the big names in the Big Ten who are coming back, and whether the return of these players is going to shift around JR's projections for who is going to compete for a Big Ten championship next year. JR, let's just start with the big fish, at least in my opinion, arguably the best transfer portal player that was available. Yaxel Lenneberg has decided that he's going to come to Michigan. Yeah, I guess he's not coming back to Michigan. He's just a kid who's decided to transfer to the Wolverines. But, there's a lot of 50-50 talk. There's a lot of 60-40 talk. The fact that he's going back to the Wolverines, I think, is a huge win for Dusty May. Dusty May has had one heck of an offseason. I trust, Illinois fans are well aware of that, taking one of our players. But I think Yaxel is the guy who's going to make the Wolverines, at the very least, a preseason top 10 team. Am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right, and they'll probably be a top 5 team with Lindeborg back. Now, I have my concerns. It doesn't mean I don't think they're going to be a top 10 team at the very least. I just have some concerns about shooting and stuff like that. But overall, Lindeborg is, he's going to be one of the best players in the country. He's going to be an All-American. So you bring him back, and that instantly improves your team, regardless of the question marks that maybe some people might have, which, in all fairness, Michigan fans know the question marks as well. I was listening to a podcast today, and they were very open about we do need to wonder about these areas, such as shooting, and how that's going to go. So they know that, but again, you have a player as transformative, Yaxel Lindeborg, the size, the speed, his ability, scoring, everything else. Really what this comes down to is guys like him, they wanted assurance. They wanted something concrete to say, are you going to draft me in the top, 20, in the top 15, or whatever it might be? And there were not a whole lot of assurances being given. So with that going on, it was really interesting to see some guys stay and other guys move on, because at the end of the day, like, some of these guys, I guess, got insurances, and some of these guys just couldn't get anything for sure. And they said, well, forget this. I got a whole lot of money I can go make at, college basketball at Michigan or wherever else. So I'll just go there and make that money. And then we'll see what happens when I eventually do have to go to the NBA.
Another guy who I think is going to have a huge impact on what the Big Ten standings are going to look like next year is Nate Biddle. He announced on Wednesday that he's going to be returning to the Oregon Ducks. For me, it's obviously very early in the off season, but as I'm trying to learn about what these teams are going to look like next year, Oregon for me was one of those teams where I still was kind of undecided about, but bringing in a guy like Biddle, who has all Big Ten, pedigree at this point, I think is huge for the Ducks, and I think kind of cements them as one of those teams that's going to be a team to reckon with next season.
Yeah, without Biddle, they would have been a bottom half of the Big Ten team to me. That's just the way the roster shaped up. They did get some good players. They got that Elon guard, and obviously Jackson Shellstad is still there. But I just never felt like Shellstad was consistent enough for me to say, "Oh, this is a game-changing player for him." Now, maybe next season that happens. Maybe he keeps developing and gets to that point. But he's just not been consistent enough for me. So to get back one of the most consistent players in the Big Ten with Nate Biddle, with his defense, his rebounding, his low post scoring, just everything that he's able to bring to this team. It's huge for Dana Altman, and it always kind of felt like he knew he was coming back. Sometimes you can gauge these things when teams are going out and they're going after players, or maybe they sign a player, you're like, okay, so that's a lot like the other player. They didn't really go out and get anybody like a Nate Biddle, so kind of felt like the entire time you knew this was happening, but obviously the news that he's coming back, it puts the Warriors to rest for Oregon fans.
Another guy that isn't too much of a shock that he's coming back. There were some whispers that Illinois fans wanted to go after him just because of his familial ties to the university. But John Blackwell is going to be returning to the Wisconsin Badgers. I think this is a huge pickup for Greg Gard and Wisconsin. And we'll talk about, our top 4, top 5 projections in a little bit. But losing John Tonje, but bringing back Blackwell, I think is going to have the Wisconsin Badgers once again a potentially top 5 team in the conference.
For sure. And I really liked what they did with the transfer portal additions. They weren't exactly the biggest names in the world, but they were guys that fit their system and fit what they did. Same thing with John Blackwell. Wisconsin didn't really go out and get anybody of his caliber, of his type. So you always kind of felt like he was probably coming back, and Wisconsin was relying on that. So it is good for them they did that. But also Wisconsin went out and they got ball handlers. They got Rode, and they got Nick Boyd as well, who is a very good point guard and to my estimation, from San Diego State. So I think this Wisconsin team, they're going to look different because they're not going to have John Tonje or anything like that, obviously. But I think this is actually a better constructed team for what they want to do next year. We'll see if it pays off. Obviously, losing Tonje and what he can give to you is huge. But Blackwell and the other guys that they brought in, I think it's going to be a nice cohesive group together, and I would not be surprised if this is a top 5 team in the Big Ten next year.
Last guy we'll talk about, Bruce Thornton to the Ohio State Buckeyes. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Thornton needed to come back. They needed to bring him in for another year, and obviously he needed the development for another year. Doesn't really have the size, doesn't really have the speed. He's kind of a thicker guard, so I never really thought he was going to go to the NBA. He might have a short G League career there, but it's not somebody. He's not a Dwayne Washington. He's not a Malachi Branham or somebody like that had that kind of game that was fit for the NBA. Bruce Thornton is a Big Ten basketball guard. I mean, that's what he is. He's thicker. He's strong. He's somebody that can get himself into the paint and do some things for you. But at the end of the day, he's going to be a nice addition for Ohio State. He's going to do what they had him do last year. The key for them is if they can get a wing who can be a ball handler, like an Andrew Rode was for Wisconsin coming in, can they get somebody who's an additional ball handler? Because John Mobley Jr., he's just not a good enough ball handler to be that secondary guy. They're going to need a wing. They're going to need somebody else. And listen, I like Gabe Cupps. I've always kind of liked Gabe Cupps, but I feel really, really nervous if Gabe Cupps is your secondary ball handler on the team. That's just me. I think he's fine as a third guy, but your secondary guy, depth, injuries, stuff like that happens, and he's your first guy. I'm not trying to disrespect Gabe Cupps or anything like that. I just think it's a much safer bet if he's your third guy rather than your second guy.
All right, JR, before I let you go, let's hear your top 4 right now. Who finished the top 4 in the Big Ten Conference in basketball next year?
Oh my, top 4 in the Big Ten in basketball next year. Well, Purdue, I'm going to go with number 1. I'm going to go with Michigan, probably number 2, maybe number 3. That Axel Lindenberg addition is really important. I'm going to go with Illinois at number 3. I was kind of maybe not going to go with that, but at the same time, I was like, I don't think they need Will Riley. I think Andre Starkovich is a really good addition for them. So I feel good about Illinois next year, if not top 3, top 4 at the very least. And then the 4th one is kind of a wild card for me. me, it's honestly probably either UCLA or Wisconsin. I'm going to go with UCLA, though. Donovan Dent, a spectacular player. Mick Cronin knows what he wants to get, but again, I'm putting my eggs in the basket of Xavier Booker here, so we'll see how that works out for me.
But I'm going to say Illinois wins the conference next year. I think Brad Underwood shocks everybody, and it's Locked On Illini, and that's why the Illini fans are watching this. So, of course, Illinois wins the conference next year. Purdue finishes in second. Michigan finishes in third. Again, I think they're going to be very good, but they've got clear flaws which I think a lot of people are overlooking. And fourth, you're deciding between UCLA and the Wisconsin Badgers. I'm actually going to go with the Wisconsin Badgers. I'm at the point now where Greg Gard, I'm not making fun of him anymore. He's obviously a very solid basketball coach, and when he finds the right players for his system, the Wisconsin Badgers win basketball games. All right, Jared, before I let you go, let the folks know one more time where they can find your work.
Yeah, the Big Ten Huddle, Twitter, Instagram, all those places. Here on YouTube, we've actually had better numbers this past week or two than we've had for most of the offseason. So if you found the content, we appreciate you listening to it. But like Sonny said, even if you don't listen to the podcast, there's a lot of good content on Twitter, kind of big picture, Big Ten stuff. Obviously, you can find great Illini work here. You can find great teamwork just about everywhere else. But if you want kind of big picture, looking at the entire conference and how things fit together, you can find it over at the Big Ten Huddle. There's a football channel and a basketball channel. The basketball channel, not really been posting on it much lately because, like I said, I'm not a huge NBA draft guy. So I've been kind of away from that. But now that most of that stuff is settled and not really there, I'll be posting a lot more here in about a week or two.
Friend of the show, JR. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. See ya.
And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Locked On Illini. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you've hit that like button. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button. We've got so much content waiting for you on this channel. So if you could, spread the word. Send this to an old roommate of yours. Your son's going to be a new student in Champaign this fall. This is the one-stop shop for daily Illini coverage. Until next time, ILL. Love you guys.